Hey horror fans, Bored Now, back with Rachel McDonald. On this video we're going to be talking about a brand new cinema release, which is the latest in the Evil Dead franchise. So this is Evil Dead Rise, which just came out this week. The first Evil Dead movie in a decade now, since the remake slash reboot from 2013, which was from Freddy Alvarez, who also did the first Don't Breathe movie. But
okay.
That was the last time we had an Evil Dead movie. Since then, you've also had the TV series Ash vs. Evil Dead, which is directed by an Irish director called Lee Corin. And he directed a movie a few years back called A Hole in the Ground, which was, again, a very low budget, like Irish horror movie, which mostly got critical acclaim. I think I heard a couple of people who weren't so keen on it, but I think generally speaking, it got some pretty good buzz. I've not seen it yet, so I can't really comment. So he's the director for this movie. And we'll definitely talk about the way the movie ends and the way the movie starts, because it sort of bookends it. But the characters you see at the start of the movie, you think are going to be the main characters, but it turns out they're not. The main characters of the movie are this family, like a single parent family. So this character called Ellie, she's got a few kids, like sort of a teenage daughter, a couple of daughters, and then a son, into like bringing them up without much support from the father, who I think lives in a different country, and they live in like a tower block. And that's like the main setting for most of the movie, is this one location. And at the start of the story, Eddie's sister, called Beth, who she hasn't really had much contact with over recent years, comes to stay, and there's a lot of family history which gets sort of drummed up as a result. Two very different characters, so that's part of the tension. But the Evil Dead plot really kicks in when the son, Danny, he finds the Book of the Dead. There's a hole at one point because there's an earthquake. He finds the book. He, of course, brings it to the apartment, as characters in these movies do, along with some classic vinyl records, because he's got an interest in that. And one of the other daughters, the oldest daughter, Bridget, questions like, no, throw that book away. It's really creepy. At that point, they decide then the mother's not going to let them out their house that night. So it's like, okay, do it first thing tomorrow. Famous last words. So later on, Danny starts playing the record, and it's this religious figure. His like sermon on the record, he's preaching about the book of the Dead, and this is what unleashes like the demons and the threat of the movie, and the Evil Dead plot gets kicked into gear. So that's Evil Dead Rise. Before we discuss it and what we thought of the movie, Rachel, just give me a little sense of your history with this franchise. Have you seen many of the movies? Do you like the ones you've seen?
So I've seen the original movie, which I have to say I was not a massive fan of. I don't know if it's just not my style or I just didn't like it. I have to say I never quite got past the tree rape scene. That was highly disturbing and really turned me off. And I have also seen Army of Darkness, which that was interesting. I saw that at a friend's place one night in my teens, and we were very drunk. And I just remember the rest of the night we were running around yelling, "Give us some sugar, baby," because that was like one of the lines. That was like all I could remember. So I'm not a massive fan of The Evil Dead, but again, I've only seen those two movies once. I haven't seen the second movie, and I haven't seen the TV show. So I do know, because I watch a lot of horror stuff and I watch a lot of like horror documentaries and things like that, I do know the staples of The Evil Dead. Like when I was watching this film, there were a few things I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's obviously like supposed to be like a shout out, and this is supposed to be emulating like the sort of camera work, stuff like that. But as a whole, this is not a franchise that I've really watched much of or seen much of or ever been the biggest fan of. I think that first movie and that tree scene just traumatized me so much that I was just like, I'm not coming back to this. But I would be willing to give it another go, and I would definitely like to actually see the second one that Raimi made, because I've heard that it's like almost a remake of the first, just with a higher budget and a slightly better script, and you know, it's like a remake / sequel, and so I wouldn't mind seeing that one and seeing how that goes. But yeah, overall, not really my franchise, because just those first two movies just didn't grab me when I first watched them. But I would revisit it and see if my mind changes as I get older.
Of the franchise overall, like, I've not seen everything. I still haven't seen that third movie from the original. I know it's the one where it's like a period thing, isn't it?
It is, it's bizarre.
Parts of the history. Now, we've been on another video tonight. We've been talking about really great horror sequels and also really good trilogies. And I think the original Evil Dead trilogy is really good because they're all distinctly different to each other. And like, I think the first movie, even with some of like the weird sequences like that tree one and some of the wacky stuff in there, like it does actually play like quite a straightforward horror movie at times. And then the second one definitely becomes more farcical and absurdist. And one of the big strengths of Sam Raimi is doing like the mix of like horror and comedy like that. He does have like the wacky slapstick style things going on with his horror, and he's one of the best at it. I remember when Drag Me to Hell came out, and I went to see that at the cinema, and I just remember there is a scene, and again, it's the sort of scene where it definitely feels like it's sort of funny and scary, but at the same time. And I just remember like these two girls at the back of the cinema. That's the way they were reacting to it, where they were both laughing and screaming like pretty much at the same time. And so that's one of the things he does really well. So, but yeah, Evil Dead 2, I had it on my horror list when we did our favorite horror movies. So I think I like the first one a lot, but Evil Dead 2 is a rare sequel, which is better than the original. The remake / reboot they did in 2013, I was a bit lukewarm on. I wasn't as into it as some people, but I think at the time my attitude was because I didn't expect anything that special, like just a remake of a classic horror movie, then what I got was actually pretty solid, and I was quite satisfied with that. Like, I think it sort of did some kind of justice to the original movie, but so overall I sort of come away thinking like, that was a solid like 6 out of 10 star movie. And I'm not sure I expect much more than that. I don't necessarily feel the need to have like a whole franchise, but at the same time, as long as they can continue doing wacky things and continue doing like different premises and just shaking it up a bit, then I'm still happy to be getting this stuff. And also, like, because this is the first one in a decade, then it feels like there's been enough distance now where it's like, I'm ready for another Evil Dead movie. And once again, different director, so different pair of hands on it. So with that in mind, what did you think about Evil Dead Rise?
I think I came away from it with a feeling of, that was fine. And that was pretty much it, you know? Like, I didn't love it. I didn't come out going, oh my God, that was fantastic and amazing. But I didn't come out going, that was terrible and awful. I think it was just fine. It was good, you
Yeah.
know. I think there were scenes that were really quite effectively scary. I think I have to admit, I thought there'd be more gore than there was. I really, because I
Okay.
when I saw that it was rated R, I always double check R films just in case there's any kind of sexual violence, and obviously, you know, given the the original movie, so I just wanted to make sure there wasn't any of that. So I read the parents' guide on IMDb, and it was going on and on about how much gore there is in this movie and this and that. So when I saw the movie, I was like, I don't know if I've just been desensitized by horror movies or something,
Yeah,
but the
we've
gore
seen
was
a
not
lot at
as
this point.
intense. Yeah. I mean, there were some instances where I actually did kind of go, oh, okay, no, not watching that. But yeah, overall the gore wasn't as much as I had expected. But I thought that it was fairly solid, you know. I thought the characters were pretty good. I particularly thought the sister, Beth, she got a nice little arc, you know, because
Yeah.
we had that revelation right at the beginning. You know, the very first scene is her finding out she's pregnant. And then, of course, over the course of the movie, she kind of has to act as a surrogate mother, you know, to the kids. I also thought the chick who played the mother, Ellie, was quite good, especially once she was possessed. I thought that played out quite well.
And she's Australian, by the way.
Yes, she is.
Yeah.
She is.
Alicia Sutherland.
Yes. I thought the kids were fine. Funniest part, though, about halfway through the film, when something happened, they were wrapping someone up, and my sister turns to me and she's like, who is that? And I'm like, that's the sister. And she's like, no, but there's two boys. I'm like, no, Jess, that's a girl. And she was like, no, there's two brothers. And I'm like, Jess, I says to my sister, I'm like, her name is Bridget. And she's like,
Yeah.
oh, I thought the name was Bridges. I'm like, oh, who's called Bridges? It was so funny. We had this whole back and forth.
I mean, she did look a bit more like a tomboy, didn't she?
Yeah,
But
definitely.
no, yeah, Bridget.
But yeah, that
is the
was
name,
quite funny.
not Bridges.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and I thought that the setting was quite interesting. You know, the fact that they were in this, you know, this kind of condemned building, and knowing that the building was condemned meant that you knew that there were going to be issues with them trying to get out. You know, I thought, you know, having that confined setting, you know, because, you know, obviously the original's like the cabin in the woods kind of thing, a very confined, very suffocating setting. So I thought that was pretty good. I did find some of the films, again, this might just be my local cinema, but some of the scenes were very dark. Like I was a few times I was straining to see what was happening. Sometimes they play movies really dark here and you just don't see what's going on.
Right.
And I thought there were a couple of fun scenes that were quite effective. For example, the possession scene in the elevator, I thought that was actually quite well done. I thought you could really feel Ellie's panic as whatever was happening to her was like creeping up, and, you know, all of the stuff in the elevator started to move. And then there was that one shot of her kind of suspended and her limbs kind of went like at weird angles. I thought that was a cool visual. But like I said, there was nothing in the film to me that was like massively outstanding. But again, it just might be this type of film. I mean, it's a possession film. There's only so much you can do. I thought, you know, they had some of the camera movements I thought were very reminiscent of like Raimi, you know, those fast shots, you know, very similar to the ones where he like goes through the woods. The shaky cam, obviously a lot of like the vomiting and the blood and stuff was very reminiscent of like the original films. So yeah, overall I would say good, fine, possibly solid, but nothing spectacular, not for me anyway. What about you?
I really liked it as a fan of the Evil Dead movies, of the franchise. This delivered a lot of what you want. And it's sort of funny what you're saying about it actually not being as gory as you were expecting or shocking. It'll work quite well for non-Evil Dead fans, where I think actually for a lot of the movie, it does feel like a standard horror movie, and then it builds to those more out there type scenes, and it's definitely like the last 20 minutes where it gets really graphic and you get some really trippy, crazy stuff going on. So I think from the pacing point of view, the filmmakers did a good job of building to those scenes. So it's like they didn't peak too early, sort of thing.
Yes, I agree.
And maybe that makes it a little bit more accessible for non-Evil Dead fans. Because I would say, although there are certain scenes, especially near the end of the movie, that are very trippy and wacky, like overall, I don't think it's as off the wall as like the original movie.
No, and I felt that too.
I would say they are a bit more trippy and out there than this is. Like, in a way, this did feel more like a traditional horror movie.
Yeah, a little bit more mainstream than the other Evil Dead.
A little bit, which just happens to have like a lot of the Evil Dead moments thrown in, and
Yeah.
definitely there for the fans. So actually, I could see this working quite well for maybe non-Evil Dead fans. Like, probably when they get to the last 20 minutes, they might be, okay, what the fuck is this? But like, I don't think they have those moments throughout the movie. They do sort of build to it. And like I said, I've not seen the director's other movie, but based on this one, I think he is a really good director. Like, his
I thought the direction was quite good.
Was really good, and there's definitely some really tense scenes. Like you, I did like a lot of the dynamics with the families and like the journey some of the characters go on, like the two sisters in particular.
Yeah.
I was getting quite strong Juliette Lewis vibes from the Beth character, like the way she speaks, definitely.
Oh yeah, I can kind of see that. Yeah.
And the Alyssa Sutherland character goes, like, I think she's probably become a bit of a scream queen, like, already because of this role and what she goes through and some of the images. And I think they did cast the children very well as well, because a lot of times, it is hard to cast really good children, and I think I believed in them as a family and the dynamic. And I thought the youngest Cassie was just adorable. I thought she was absolutely brilliant and kind of fitting that then she's like there at the very end and is a big part of what actually happened. Of moments where the CGI wasn't great, because
they're just a few.
I'm thinking one of the scenes where Bridget gets possessed and some of like the effects on her face, I think that stood out as not
like
being
the thing
quite...
that was like spreading across her cheek.
But in general, they do a good job, I think, of toning that stuff down. So, and probably in this sort of movie, it's quite a wacky, eccentric, over the top. Like, you're not supposed to take this movie that seriously. Like, it is a bit more of a farcical Evil Dead style. And so, in a way, it doesn't matter too much. But there was just certain moments like that where it stood out, then the effects were a little bit rough. But overall, like, they did use quite a bit, like, practical effects, some great direction, some great tense scenes. I really like, actually, when she was out in the hallway, the Ellie character, where she was possessed, and the shot through, like, the peephole.
Yes, I thought that was very
just
effective.
her moving about, doing different things. And there were obviously some really, like tense moments and some quite gross moments, like when she went after the neighbor and basically ate his eye out and kind of spat it back
and then
out.
spat it, and then someone else choked. Now that I went, okay, that's like classic Evil Dead stuff, like really bizarre. Like, let's suck someone's eye out and shove it through and like pop it into someone else's throat. Yeah, that was intense. That was pretty funny, that bit. I also thought there were some bits that sorry, you go.
Well, no, just like you said, I also like the location, like this one set in this apartment building. That was a good sort of setting for it. Part of the point with the opening as well, I think it was a subversion, because the opening made you think then, hey, it's going to be set
cabin
in
the woods
similar
again.
location. But then they changed it around on you. So,
I thought there were some effectively creepy moments as well. Like, I particularly liked the moment when they had laid Ellie's body, because they thought that she was dead at this point, on her bed, and then her phone rings, and it's that voicemail that Ellie left, but then it changes and you hear Ellie say, "Help me, I'm burning," and then she turns around and looks at the corpse, and the eye is open and you can see like a tear. Like, I thought that was a very effective way of showing how the possession has taken Ellie and how horrifying it must be for her to be trapped inside like her own body. And so I thought that part was effective. I like the part where, she's all like, "Don't let it take my children." Again, just kind of showing that Ellie is somewhere still in there during the possession, which is kind of horrifying. Yeah, as I said, some of the gore actually did affect me, even though there wasn't as much as I thought there would be. Some of it I thought was particularly nasty. The glass eating scene, when the daughter becomes possessed, like, and then you see the glass like sticking out of her, like, her throat, and then as part of that same scene, when the aunt comes in and she trips over, and the possessed daughter, she grabs the cheese grater and and grates down her leg. And I was saying, my sister and I were talking about it, and we're saying those two scenes really got to us because they're using things that you can imagine what that would feel like. Like, for example, you know, there's a scene where someone gets like a pole through the head. No one can really imagine what that is like, but you can imagine what it would be like to accidentally eat a piece of glass, because almost everyone has stepped on glass. Or you can imagine how painful it would be to get a grater to the back of your leg, because we've all, you know, been grating carrots or something and accidentally nicked our fingers. So I thought like that was particularly effective because it really just made you go, oh, like that's something that could happen in real life. And I thought that was like particularly good. I have to say, the kid, the brother, what an idiot. That book literally had teeth, and you thought it was a good idea to open it. Like, every time I see these movies, I'm like, don't read the Latin. Don't, like, that is rule number one. Don't read the Latin. You got to see these movies and you're like, well, now you kind of get what you deserve, don't you? Like, if you're going to read the Latin or use the Ouija board or summon the dark spirit, then I think you're kind of asking for it. So but I thought that was a cool, because I was wondering, I was like, how are they going to introduce the book? How are they going to introduce this element? So I kind of liked the idea that they had this earthquake, just a totally normal, you know, everyday experience for some people living in certain parts of the world, and that it opened up that thing to find like this whole building beneath their building, and then to find all of that. I thought that was a fun way to introduce the book that didn't seem too contrived, you know. So I thought that worked quite well.
I agree.
The visual effects, aside from the ones that we talked about, were quite good. Like, I thought the way the mother's appearance kind of deteriorated over the course of the film, you know, from her first possession to like right at the end, was done really well. And like you, I think the peephole angle was actually quite clever and worked really well. Let you see the horror without fully seeing the horror. And I thought that was quite effective. And I thought it had a good runtime. It was actually quite short. It was only like an hour and 40 minutes. So I thought that was good. They didn't overstretch it.
Yeah, it was pretty much the right runtime. You don't want, with a lot of horror, you don't really want it being 2 hours long.
No,
like maybe 100 minutes is like max for a lot of horror. But I agree, the running time was about right, and it went in pretty quick as well. Very sort of easy watch, and I also enjoyed the stuff with the records and how that was a way, even though obviously like you said, he was a total idiot and very naive, but I did actually like that with the religious stuff, because that's something which has always been, I think, in the back of the Evil Dead movies and stuff. So the idea then that's the way it gets set off. Beth, his like aunt, collects them, like she's a DJ and stuff. You could see it as being that's a bit of an influence for him, like loving classic vinyl. Because also one of my favourite scenes was the scene where Beth does like the turntable stuff, where she's trying. Which again, it's one of those you think, come on, Beth, like, is this the best idea? But I actually like it because it made her proactive, and it was a good way to utilise her skills, because
because they mentioned that she was a technician or a roadie technician or something like that, a guitar technician. So I like when they do that in these kinds of movies. Yeah, so when they set up a character, to have this certain skill, and then later in the movie, the skill actually comes into play. So yeah, I actually thought that was quite well done.
It was good sort of stakes on that scene.
Yeah,
with Beth, there's some good comedy as well, because I like her. Like Eddie always calling her a groupie, and how that comes about. That's pretty funny. There's some good moments of comedy. The scene was interesting, and the way because when it came to it, and they then went back, they went to this different setting. I was like, okay, well, what was that? And it got to the point where I thought they're not going to come back to that stuff. And it's just, is it just then they're just showing us then this is maybe where the legend started, or like it's just another example? And but yeah, no, like in the end, I thought that was a really clever way to do that stuff, where it's a bit of a twist on it, where it's almost like these movies always have a bit of a gut punch ending where it's a bit
Yeah.
like, okay, it's not dead after all, the threat's still out there. So I guess it was a different way to do that when it like wrapped round back to it at the end, and it actually showed you how that stuff happened. So that stuff is actually in the future, like the way the film opened. So it was a nice little twist on that.
Yeah, I thought it was good. And I kept watching like the supporting characters. I was like, okay, so is one of these characters going to be the character that we saw in the opening scene? Are we going to see them get possessed? And then, when we saw that girl at the end, and that was a really fun way to kind of end the show. And also kind of leave it open for a sequel as well, you know, because it shows, oh, well, the evil's out there and it could be spreading. And so we might get more Evil Deads out of this if it keeps spreading, you know, from beyond this person and keeps going. So I thought that was interesting. It was a fun way to, and like you said, it was a fun bit of misdirection because we are so used to the Evil Dead films being in the cabin in the woods. So it was fun to open in the woods and think, okay, we're doing another cabin in the woods story. And then no, we actually switched it up and ended up in the condemned apartment block. So that was a little bit of a fun bait and switch, kind of setting you up for the typical Evil Dead and then saying, no, we're going to move it to a new setting. So I also thought the scalping in the opening scene was quite impressive. That was like, whoa, okay. Like, wow, let's just jump straight into it. That was intense.
Yeah, and that was because I have to say, from that opening scene, like if they were the main characters, I would have been up for that movie as well because they seem like pretty good characters. You obviously had the douchebag with the drone who was like just terrible and like
you always have those.
Yeah, absolutely. But then they subverted that because then when you got to the main characters, you didn't really have that sort of characters.
No.
I think that's part of the thing it was doing. It's almost saying that was the past Evil Dead style. This is going to be slightly different now.
Yeah.
It's a pretty fun subversion, I think. Like with Ellie, where she was trying to persuade the young daughter to like open the door. That was
when she was singing. That was quite creepy.
Because that's one of those things, because she's so young, you can understand how she would be taken in.
Yes, exactly. She's not one of the teenagers. It's like, okay, well, this chick is only like 6 or 7 years old. It's forgivable that she opens the door to her mother. Like, you can understand a child not quite understanding what's going on, what's happening. But I do like that by the end of the film, she recognizes, you know, that it's not her mother, and she says, you know, you're not my mother, or something like that. And she's kind of been broken to the point now that she realizes that this is just an evil being that is coming for her. But I thought that little actress was really good. I think she really sold the terror of this kid and was actually quite convincing. I think kid actors can be very hit or miss, but they seem to be getting better. And I think these 3 actors, but particularly the younger one, I thought were very good in the film. And I actually felt like I got a real sense of danger because, you know, it took the other 2 kids. So I was like, are we going to lose the youngest one too? Because in these types of films, I think they might actually go there, you know? And so I was like hoping that she would get out, but I was, you know, there were parts in the film where I was like, oh, I don't know if she and Beth are going to survive this. So I thought that the stakes were quite high and worked quite well. That was cool. And then I did like the climax, like towards the end when you saw kind of like all of the bodies kind of
that's where it got a bit more wacky and tricky.
Yeah, and that's where I kind of went, okay, now we're really bringing out the like crazy Evil Dead kind of, you know, over the top, you know. And then you have like the elevator, you know, dripping.
The elevator was good.
The elevator was great, and the blood pouring down and them desperately trying to like get out of there. But that monstrosity that formed with the legs and the limbs and all of the heads, like I actually thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that almost felt quite 80s and body horror, like Cronenbergian, or even a little bit like The Thing.
Definitely had that feel. And then I like that in, you know, the final showdown, we got the chainsaw, of course. My sister hasn't seen the Evil Dead film, so I had to explain to her. I'm like, the chainsaw is iconic. Yes, I'm like, the chainsaw is iconic. I was like, it's kind of like, you know, the ghost face mask. Like, you need to have the chainsaw in the Evil Dead movies. This is just this is just what it is. And I liked that the final showdown was suitably bloody and over the top and, you know, really gory with them feeding them into the wood chipper, which I thought was just a great
Yeah, that's
visual.
always a great thing to use in horror movies, isn't it? A wood chipper and
oh yeah,
so much
because it's just so horrific in its like execution. So I thought that was really fun. I also liked that like they kind of used a bit of a cause and effect. Like we had the earthquake at the beginning, which caused cracks in the floor of the car garage. So later, when they're trying to flee in the car gets stuck in one of the cracks and they can't escape. So I thought, you know, again, it's a way of setting up these things without making them feel like they're contrived. It's like, oh well, they can't escape because there was the earthquake earlier, which wrecked the floor. So I thought that was done quite well. So, you know, I do think that a lot of the things in the film were done quite well and quite effective. But like, I think maybe just because I'm not like an Evil Dead fan, it just maybe didn't work for me the way it would for a fan of the franchise who can get more out of it than like someone who hasn't really seen the films that much. And that's probably what it came down to, and a difference of like our enjoyment of the film.
Yeah. That's fair, and I'll say, because I think we are likely to get a sequel, because I saw the box office. It's doing really well, like, considering it's only been out 2 or 3 days, it's already got 42 million at the box office, so that's... For a horror movie, that's a strong
That's
opening.
good. It's got some high ratings too. I think it's got like 84% on Rotten Tomatoes and like 7.4 on IMDb. So it is doing quite well.
The early buzz was very good because it was shown a month ago at a festival, and I know there was a little bit of a controversy because like only critics had seen it, and like the Rotten Tomatoes score was going really high, and apparently that was all critics. So there was some criticism on them for like doing that. But yeah, I know that's where the buzz sort of started with that stuff. So yeah, and I'll say also, like, if there is a sequel, I wouldn't mind seeing Beth and the girl
Cassie. Yeah, I wouldn't either, because I thought they had good arcs and good characterization, and Beth is in a position by the end of the film that if this came back, she could stare it down and take it on again. So yeah, that could be interesting.
Go to a different phase, and you could obviously move them to a different location, so you could still keep it quite fresh, but bring those characters back because you're now sort of invested in them. So yeah, good stuff.
That was good.
Okay, so that's our thoughts on Evil Dead Rise. Of course, let us know your thoughts in the comments. So Rachel, what would you rate it?
Oh, like I said, I thought this was solid, but I didn't think it was anything spectacular. I would watch it again, and I think if I go back and watch the original films, maybe I'll gain more of an appreciation. But for now, I'm going to go with 6.5. So good, solid, but not spectacular in my books. Just very enjoyable, and I definitely didn't regret seeing it, but I don't think I can give it any higher than that. So 6.5 from me. We'll see if that changes in the future if I rewatch the original films. What about you?
Yeah, well, yeah, I really enjoyed this. This really delivered, and so far it is my favourite horror movie of the year. So I'm gonna go with an 8 out of 10. I'm not going to go high because it's the first time, and it could go up on a further viewing. But no, I'd say it's a very good horror movie. It delivers on the Evil Dead stuff, but it also does enough to make it feel like a new Evil Dead movie, like a new chapter. So it doesn't feel too derivative or like copy and paste from like the older, but just a nice mix of having like tie-ins and nods to the core fans and giving the fans the stuff that they want from an Evil Dead movie. But also, as I said, I think I could see it working quite well for non-Evil Dead fans as well. And I'll say I do prefer it to the 2013 movie. I don't know if that's a hot take or not, but I would say personally, I've only seen that once, so maybe it'll go up if I see it again. But like having seen that once and seeing this just the once, I would say I prefer this new release. So yeah, we probably overall recommend going and seeing it if you're a fan, if you're a horror fan. definitely a good one to go and see in the cinema. But if you have seen it, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always. And look out for other horror movie reviews that we've done. We've done like franchises, so we've done all of the Scream movies, up to date with that. We recently finished doing the Final Destination franchise, so all 5 movies from that. You can find those reviews. We've also done the Conjuring movies, the 3 original, and different things. We did like the Fear Street trilogy, which was our first review together on the channel. So if you're interested in horror, go and check out some of those reviews as well. But Rachel, if you want to promote your channel.
Guys, you can follow me, Rachel McDonald, video essays on TV shows and movies. I do have some horror related essays on there. My Tumblr is also linked through my YouTube, and Keith will usually put a link in the description for you lovely people. So come and follow me everywhere.
Okay, thanks guys. Keep watching horror movies and we'll see you again soon.
Bye.
Goodbye.